Okay, everyone, welcome back. Today I have with me the host of the Hello and Goodbye podcast. This is Leanna Joan. Welcome on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And it is hello and goodbye, right? Is it?
Hello and goodbye.
Hello
Yes.
and goodbye. I like that name.
Thank you.
Where did that come from?
So the podcast we're at about 2.5 years, actually coming up on 3 years. And when I had the idea to create the podcast, I knew I wanted it to be about dating, because I was married in my 20s, and then I got divorced, and then I got thrown into the dating world for really like the first time. And then I had all of these like insane, crazy stories of like, if anyone listening is like dating currently, you meet someone and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. And like 2 weeks later, it's like ghosted or bye, or like the whole thing never. I mean, people just constantly come in and out of our lives all the time, not just with dating, but with friends and sometimes family. And so the whole idea was like, sometimes it's hello forever, and most of the time it's hello and goodbye, one second to the next. So
That's a really great way to put it. I mean, I've considered it, but like dating in your late 20s, early 30s, especially in like a pandemic type situation or post-pandemic. I don't know what we're considering this now, but just all the dating apps. And, I would love to talk about how one would navigate that while living with a chronic illness. I think that's a really fun topic we can get into, right?
sure. Yeah.
All right.
Right now?
No, I was going to say, before we dive into that, why don't you tell the listeners, about your background, who you are, what you do, and also sharing a little bit about your pelvic health journey, because you told me that you're okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am from a small town in Southern California called Redlands, California. And I grew up here. I grew up as a pastor's daughter, and very kind of like, you date to marry, and you're supposed to get married to a Christian and all of that. And so I ended up, when I graduated high school, I went to the South and went to college in Mississippi, met a boy, my first boyfriend ever. And then we got married. I was 21. And he was like my first, sexual experience, and the only one that I had. And our sex life was like bleh, for like 5 years. And I didn't know any better than that. And then one of my friends, because I had never orgasmed, and I didn't know that I was supposed to or not. And so one of my friends like sent me a vibrator, and then I was like, oh, this is amazing.
That's a good friend.
Yeah. But then it was like, kind of like, because of the Christian background, then it was like my ex-husband like didn't know how he felt about that. And is that, and there was just a lot of like we had sex before marriage. And so there was a lot of sexual shame within the marriage. I think he felt like he wasn't a man because he couldn't make me orgasm on my own. And we never did any research about it. We never talked to anybody. We were just kind of like, I guess we got to figure this out on our own. And then through the years, I teach piano and I teach yoga. So I've always been kind of a freelancer, creative. And towards the end of our marriage, I don't know, I never felt desired, like fully desired by him. So then, lots of stuff happened. And if you guys go follow me on Hello and Goodbye, there's so many, there's episodes talking about all of it or whatever. But after our divorce, I started exploring more sexually and more partners, and got my first yeast infection. I had never gotten one because I'd only ever been with like my ex-husband. And it was like, okay, I got my first yeast infection like pretty quick after divorce. And then it was like chronic. Then it was just like, it went away. And then like a year later, it was like yeast, got treated, bacterial vaginosis. And it was like one thing after another. And the biggest thing that happened within that span, not only of the emotional trauma of the divorce, like kind of stuck in my body, but also, you know, trigger warning for those who need to like not move forward with the episode, but I was sexually assaulted. And I was sexually assaulted while also treating my yeast infection with boric acid suppositories that were given to me by my OBGYN. And so it was kind of like I got a terrible, I didn't even realize it had happened, to be honest. It was kind of in shock, and I ended up getting a really horrible UTI. I like took myself to the emergency room because I was like so ashamed about the whole thing, and still, you know, feeling like itchy and inflamed. And I honestly, like, I was like, something is like really wrong. And the emergency room, the gut doctors was just like, you have bacterial vaginosis, like you're, you know, it'll go away. Here's some medication. And what ended up happening is with like not, I mean, it took, like, I was paying out of pocket to go see OBGYNs that were like specialized in this. And it was just the kind of the same thing. Like, you know, you might be experiencing interstitial cystitis. You might have just bladder spasms. You probably just have, you know, infections, and you need to change the way you eat, and you need to do this and this and this and this. And, you know, just throwing medication. I mean, I went on bacterial vaginosis medication. What is it? Metronidazole.
I'm
For
not
like, for like 3 months. And then they put me on yeast infection medication like every 3 days for 6 months. And like all of that like messes with your body so much. And I finally, like, because I had, you know, been with different partners. I had one boyfriend. We really struggled with, I was in pain a lot. And then I finally, you know, had another boyfriend, and kind of the same thing. It's like we ended up having like anal sex a lot because vaginal sex hurt. Like I was in pain, and I would feel like I had a UTI when I didn't, from the bladder spasms, and then I'd get the infection. And all of it was real symptoms, but it was trauma just stuck in my body. So I joined, so I found VFresh through my podcast. I had reached out to the owner of VFresh. I was like, hey, do you want to do a sponsorship with me? And she's like, sure. Like, she was kind of like a new company. And so we worked together, collaborated for my podcast, and they have a group called, I recommend everybody join it, on Facebook, called V Babes. So VEE Babes. And it was only had like a few hundred people at the time, and now it's like 18,000, 20,000, I think. But it's just a support group for women who deal with chronic infections, pregnancy, you know, pelvic pain, all of that. And I had a holistic person that I had been working with for a while that really was the only person that I felt like truly was like helping me. And on the group, I was talking about, I don't remember what I brought up, but it was something like, you know, anyone have anything other than, you know, I can't even remember the name of it, the diflucan that they throw at you for yeast infections.
Mm-hmm.
And I had 2 different things. Now, again, I am not a doctor and I would recommend, you know, if you're really concerned, like, consult your doctor before you do this, or don't do it, or whatever. Don't take my word for it. One of the ladies messaged me, and she was like, try hydrogen peroxide douches. Have you heard of that?
I have not.
So for yeast infections, it's supposed to essentially clear it out. And then you use the boric acid suppository. Have you heard of boric acid suppositories?
I've heard of it. I've never luckily had to use one before, but I see people in interstitial cystitis support groups talking about bacterial vaginosis and talking about boric acid.
Yes.
So I'm glad that you're bringing this up.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's OBGYN like approved, you know, and it's like, it's really well known now, and it's a great option than medication. So I took this information that this person had given me about trying these hydrogen peroxide douches, and I took it to my holistic woman. This is going to make me sound so kooky, but she does like tapping and kind of energy reading. And she was like, okay, you need to do this many days of these hydrogen peroxide douches, followed by boric acid suppositories, followed by probiotics, which my OBGYN had also suggested you can stick a probiotic up there versus just taking it orally. Because I was on so many supplements. I wasn't doing sugar, alcohol, like I was doing all of the things that you're supposed to do, cotton underwear, no leggings, like all of this stuff. And I was just so tired of it. And for the first time with my partner, so we would have sex, I'd go do the hydrogen peroxide douche, I'd stick a boric acid, I'd take a probiotic or stick it up there, and I stopped getting infections. Wow. And I don't know if it was somatic, if like I just felt like supported, because I do believe in the power of the mind, or if it actually really helped. And then another thing that I found through that group was looking into getting a pelvic PT, which no one had ever suggested to me before. I mean, I'm in chronic bladder spasms, constantly at urgent care, thinking I have a UTI. Nope, it's just a spasm. I mean, I was in pain. I was in pain just sitting down. It just hurt so bad. And someone was like, go see a pelvic PT. So I started paying out of pocket to go see a pelvic PT, and it was life changing. So since that time, that was about 2 years ago now, where I experienced those two things, I've been able to, when I get symptoms, when I start to feel symptoms, I'm nip it in the bud, where I'll go, is it bud or butt? Nip it in the butt or nip it in the bud?
I think it's bud, but I'm not 100% sure.
We'll go with nip it in the bud.
Okay.
If I start to feel like those bladder spasms, or to be honest, I haven't had a sexual partner since like June, so I'm doing great right now. Mm-hmm. But when I do have sex, I start to have these symptoms again of like bladder spasms. And honestly, a lot of it is just like fear and PTSD of experiencing what I experienced again. But I guess that's kind of just like, it's been a long process of now I don't get infections anymore. I rarely have bladder spasms. Again, I'm not sexually active right now, but I know that's kind of like a long-winded way of answering your question, but like all of that is interspersed into like navigating dating and navigating relationships and showing up to, a hookup situation, or, one weekend and you want to have sex, and like trying not to be afraid that you're going to experience this all over again. Not only that, but dealing with the emotional aspect of this person ghosts you, or, I'll tell this story really quick. This is like, I can't believe these things have happened to me, but I mean, I'm sure people listening, like they happen to them too. But I had this one guy we met online, and it was slow to begin with. It was just like a little messaging here or there. We had a FaceTime call, and we're like, let's meet in person. We met in person, definitely chemistry, had a great time. We're making out. He's like, when can I see you again? I'm like, I don't know. I said, you want to do like Sunday, or we could do tomorrow? He's like, tomorrow, I want to see you tomorrow. I'm like, okay. And he like brought me over and made me dinner, and it was really sweet. And we made out, nothing happened. He talked about like, he was like, I can't wait. I'm just so excited to make more memories with you. Like, you're the girl of my dreams. Like, and now I know all of that is like red flags within a week or 2 weeks of talking, Mm-hmm. But at the time it feels so good to be like, oh my gosh, this person sees me, they want me, or whatever. So we hung out again. He invited me over to stay the night. And I'm not like I don't think it matters when you have sex with a person. I think they're going to be a dick, whether they're going to be a dick if you have sex with them the first night, or if you have sex with them 3 months from now. And we had talked about wanting to wait, but you're all over each other, and like, yeah, clothes are off. And I told him, I was like, listen, I said, I'm ready if you are. And he kind of paused, like I could tell like he wasn't sure. And I said, hey, I said, if you don't want to do this, like, let's just wait. And then he like didn't. And the sex was like not good. Like it was very, he didn't even, like finish. He didn't want to finish from sex. He wanted to like finish from self pleasure, which is like, okay, that's fine. It was just very like, it was, and I don't judge someone based off the first time. I think sex gets better and better when you build an emotional bond with someone. So I stayed the night, woke up with bladder spasms. So I was up all night. I made tea. I could barely get sleep. But it was like, I'm fine. Like, it'll be fine. I'll go home. I'll put a boric acid in. I'll work it out. So the next morning we wake up and I'm kind of like snuggling with him. I'm fully unclothed. Okay. I'm laying on his chest and I could tell, like, I had asked him, I said, hey, let's go make some coffee. Cause he said he was going to make me breakfast. We're going to go on a hike. I'm like, great. Cause he was like a chef. And so I was like, hey, can we go make some coffee? And he kind of was like, sure. And then like, didn't move. And he had made a comment when we were getting ready for bed, because I had brought my overnight stuff. And he's like, wow, he's like, what are you moving in? Like, he'd made like a comment like that. I'm like, it's just like my overnight, like, little thing,
Has he never met a female? Like, we travel heavy.
Yeah, it's not like this was a surprise thing. I just had it in my car, like, so I could tell I have a really, really intuitive gut, and I could tell something was just off. And I said, hey, are you freaking out that I stayed the night? And he was like, yeah, kind of. Okay, so let me remind you, I'm in his bed, cuddling him, fully naked. Okay. And he says voluntarily, sometimes when I have sex with someone for the first time, I become disinterested.
Okay.
And I was like, okay. I was like, well, do you feel that way with me? He goes, yeah, kind of.
So what'd you do?
Well, I pulled away so fast and I was like, holy shit. Like, am I getting dumped in bed? Like right after sex, like the next morning by this guy that like said I was the woman of his dreams, like he's like, I can't wait to make more memories with you, like all of these things. And now we have sex and he's dumping me in bed while I'm vulnerable. I started crying like immediately. I was so hurt. And he was like, hey, he's like, it doesn't necessarily mean this is over. Like, we can work through this. And I was like, I don't know. I was like, I think this is over.
Yeah.
I texted him later and was like, was the sex bad? Like, I don't understand. He's like, no, he's like, I honestly like felt intimidated. You really knew what you were doing. And I'm like, yeah, no kidding. And, but anyway, basically, so I was pretty depressed for like a month after that. I mean, I can laugh about it now, but in the moment it was so traumatizing. And so take all of what I experienced already with pelvic pain and being nervous to have sex with someone because it might lead to bladder spasms, which I had that night. And then to emotionally be dumped by this person that invited me over after we had sex. Like, that is a lot to take in.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty brutal.
Yeah. So it's just been a long journey for me I'm still single. I'm not seeing anyone. And I want to be in a relationship at some point, but I also don't want to settle. And I need to be one thing I will give my ex-boyfriend credit for. I mean, he was really great in a lot of different ways, but he was so supportive of what I needed to do to stay healthy and to feel good. Like we would have sex and he'd be like, babe, don't forget to go do your hydrogen peroxide douche.
I love that support.
Yeah. Like, and he was just, I do think it affected our sex life a little bit. I was listening to the episode that you had sent me. I think it affected his desire because he was so afraid of hurting me.
Mhm.
And so we did struggle a little bit sexually. And to be honest, I think that'll probably be the case with my next partner too. I mean, it's always going to be, I don't want to say it's always, but I don't do as well in the beginning. If
Mhm.
I'm used to the person and it's constant and consistent and our pH can line up and condoms irritate it, so we get to a point where we can't, we don't have to wear condoms, and then I can maybe, get into a routine, I'll do better. But the first initial couple times, or even I was seeing someone like casually and we'd have sex like once every 2 weeks, that wasn't good. Like it just didn't, I'd have a reaction every time. So I don't know. That's like a really long answer to what you asked me.
No, that's all fantastic stuff that you just said there. Like I had so many comments I wanted to say, but you were on a roll. And so I'm gonna just go off of the sex conversation because
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about my journey recently. I started doing sex therapy a couple
Oh,
weeks ago, and I mean, what led me to get to that point was I've had IC my whole life. I have never had a positive sexual experience, and there have been a lot of them. If my mom or anyone I know is listening to this, like literally turn it off right now. Stop listening. But like I remember just recently I was reading the book Come As You Are, and it's a fantastic book. Everyone should read it. But there was this section of the book where she's like, write down 3 positive sexual experiences that you have had in your past. And I was like, shit, I can't name one. And I was like, that's a problem. And I've been in a 4-year relationship with my boyfriend, and like sex is very infrequent, and any sort of intimacy, like even just like snuggling on the sofa, to me sets off that panic response in my brain, because I'm like, oh my gosh, is he gonna think that I want to have sex? Like, am I gonna be in pain later? Like it's just the snowball effect in my brain. And I feel like a lot of people in the pelvic pain, IC, whatever community, I think a lot of us are going through that, and the partner as well, whoever it is on the other side of this, they're also being affected by it. And so I've been working on like being more open with communication and just trying to work through it, because it really is a journey. So that's
yeah.
my update. You just
Yeah.
met me.
Yeah, I mean, it is a journey, and it's a journey that often feels lonely because, and I love that you started this podcast. I love that Hannah started her podcast, Beehive. And I think it's amazing that and V Babes on Facebook, it's amazing that we have community now where women don't feel alone in this. Because can you imagine a woman in the 70s or 80s even the 90s, going through something like this and not knowing other women experience this? And their husbands just expecting, that's what they're expected to do, have sex with their husbands so that, the man can get the pleasure that he deserves,
Yeah,
you know?
I'm watching House of the Dragon right now, like the Game of Thrones spinoff, and I'm just like, and also I don't even know if it's supposed to be like in the past or if it's just dystopian, whatever. But basically I was like, imagine living hundreds of years ago and having like IC or having pelvic pain. I don't know how I would cope with that.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you and your partner, like you said that you're working on your communication more, like how does your partner deal with it and feel about it?
He has always felt undesired, and I can understand how I come off that way. Obviously he's very attractive. I wouldn't be dating him if he wasn't. I'm kind of shallow, if you must know. He's a great person, honestly. I love him. He really struggles, but he just wants me to do, what's best for me and what's best for the relationship. And it just came to a point for me where I started to see in the relationship us, bickering more and more, and, having intimate moments less and less and less. And I was like, okay, this is either I need to get help for myself, or like this is not going to end in a way we both want it to end. And something I've been working on with my sex therapist is not viewing myself as being broken or something's wrong with me. Obviously something is wrong with me when it comes to like my anatomy and my IC and all of that, but you know, having a low sex drive, like there are many people out there that have very low sex drive, or you know, they have issues going on, and prioritizing myself and what I need and the work I need to put through or put myself, you know
forward.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes. Getting lost in my brain. But it really, honestly, I think I got here because of a mixture of things. So one of those things is the pelvic pain, but another one of those things is growing up in a household that didn't talk about sex. Like comments are made, like very judgmental comments. Like I didn't grow up religious, but it was kind of similar to what I feel like you might have experienced growing up.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
like no one talks about it. It feels shameful. And those are feelings that I felt before, is the shame and guilt. And, you know, it's like, I'm wired to think that what I'm doing is wrong when really it's not. We're humans. This is what
Yeah.
we're intended to do.
Yeah. Are you able to orgasm, or does that trigger
Yeah,
your?
no, I can. I just like the desire isn't there. And I don't know if it could be medication related. It could be, you know, that trauma response for
Yeah.
me. It could be a lot of things. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of what we're working on is making my brain and my body feel safe and see where I can get, you know?
I'm curious, have you done pelvic PT?
Yeah. So over the past 10 years, I've seen 4 different physical therapists.
Yeah.
And I mean, it helps a little, but
Do they go inside and do the manipulation?
yeah,
Yeah.
they do. I've even had pelvic floor Botox 2 times, and you know, it doesn't seem to
Ooh,
make a difference for, oh, it's the worst. It is one of
that sounds so painful. Holy
it is
shit.
one of the most painful things I've felt in my life. I mean, it's bad, like having needles in your,
Ugh,
yeah,
ugh.
you don't want to do it if you don't have to do it, but
Yeah.
you got to do what you got to do sometimes. And
Yeah.
with IC, it's just all experimental and, you know, trial and error type things. So I'm really glad to hear that you don't have IC and that you were able to calm that bacterial vaginosis down. Can you just quickly go over the common symptoms of that? Because we've never talked about it on the show before.
Yeah. So, well, we'll distinguish yeast versus bacterial vaginosis. So yeast is itchy, white, kind of cottage cheese discharge sometimes, sometimes inflammation, sometimes some burning. The yeast can burn, and then sometimes you'll have a yeast infection that has one of those symptoms, and sometimes you'll have it where you have all of it. Like I often had yeast infections that like didn't have any discharge, but I knew it was there. Bacterial vaginosis is going to be less itchy. The discharge looks kind of greenish yellow, and it can have burning, it can have inflammation, it could be itchy. The big distinguisher is the discharge. Is the bacterial vaginosis has a fishy smell to it and kind of that yellow green discharge, and the yeast infection usually doesn't smell, and it has more of a whiter, like thicker cottage cheese. Now again, I am not a doctor. I am
Yeah.
not a nurse practitioner. This is just from my experience and what I've gone through and what I've researched. I've done so many research. I've looked at like different discharges like online.
Mhm.
My girlfriend and she struggled with the same thing. We used to send each other, this is so gross. Used to send each other pictures of our discharge, be like, what is this?
Oh my goodness. Wow. That is
Yeah.
friendship. Is that the same person who sent you the vibrator?
No, different friends.
You have great friends.
I do. They're the best.
Um,
Yeah, so that has been my experience. My biggest symptoms with both is is inflammation, which then, because of that one bladder infection that I had that was so painful, that sent my bladder into essentially, I had a couple, what's it called when they do a cystoscopy, I
Mhm.
think,
Yep.
yeah. So I had a couple of those, and I did have an ulcer in my bladder. So I did get it was very small. But that can cause blood in your urine. It's triggered by spicy foods, alcohol, coffee, things like that, which I think I see is as
All the
well.
things. Yep.
Yeah. So then I'd have to, cut back on foods and see what would help. And I am thankful that the pelvic PT has really done a great job with that. And I have this contact now that I kind of use just on like need be basis now. But yeah, so that's the main thing with the infections. I will say this, so for bacterial vaginosis, they'll give you metronidazole, which is they can do a gel or a tablet. The problem is that I found personally, and from groups that I've been a part of and online forums and everything, is it wipes out all of your good flora too. So it wipes it all out. And so then what happens is, because it's wiping out all your good flora, then you're getting the yeast infection. Well, then you get the yeast infection, then you take diflucan, which then you get into this cycle. And even my OBGYN was like, we got to get you off medication, because he's like, this happens. It's just this cycle over and over. So something that also helps me is like, if I feel a little like stale or whatever, like I'll smell something, I'll just stick a probiotic up there. I get like a woman's probiotic, I stick it up there, and usually it clears it up, or I'll stick a boric acid suppository up there. You can follow for infections to treat or prevent. You can use boric acid suppositories. You just follow the instructions on the bottle or call your OBGYN to see what works. So there's a lot of different, the good news is there's so many different ways to treat it now other than oral pills.
Mhm.
And the yeast infection cream that you can get at the store is nice sometimes, just because if it's like really itchy, it can help almost immediately. So it just, both of them really suck. And I hate that I went through it, and I hate that other women go through it too, because it's really annoying.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
honestly, those symptoms overlap a lot with, I see vulvodynia,
Yep.
vestibulodynia, all of that, and STDs. I mean,
Yeah.
I in college thought I had a yeast infection. I had chlamydia. I was like,
Yeah.
shit. Like, I
Yeah.
truly thought this was a yeast infection. Like, there's no
Yeah.
way. And then I realized, how easy and how common it is to get an STD. Like, it's
Hmm.
crazy to me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just wanted to be open and
Yeah.
honest about that,
No,
because
yeah.
big stigma.
Well, and that's a good point though, to be like, it's not always the best to self-diagnose yourself, or it's always the best to diagnose yourself. So, you can always call your doctor or go to an urgent care or whatever and have them do a quick swab, make sure it's not an STD, because
Yep.
that, you're right, that is an option. It could be, there's trichomoniasis, I think, is very similar
Mhm.
discharge to bacterial vaginosis. So, it's good to get checked up on those too, I think. Can I say something really quick? I was like, when I
Sure.
was I have like clinically diagnosed ADHD, so my brain is always like but when we were talking about condoms, I remember seeing this on Instagram. There's this account that I follow called Drag His Ass, and they posted, some girl tweeted, and it was so funny, they reposted it, but it was like, guys are like, but I can't come if I wear a condom. And the girl's like, well, I probably won't come, period. So you can, so now we'll be in the same boat.
Hilarious. I love that. Oh
Yeah.
my
But
gosh.
then made me remind it, obviously like condoms are the best way to prevent against STDs, and they can help prevent against infections as well, because the pH of the penis, inserting into the vagina, like the pH can be thrown off, and cum can also throw off the pH. So, even though if someone has a latex allergy, then look for condoms that are more organic and maybe lambskin or something like that. and, you know, try, if you're getting infections, try wearing condoms. Even if you have a long-term partner, you know, that might help against that as well. Get organic lube. Don't use coconut oil. You know, there's a lot of things
Wait,
online.
why not coconut oil? Because I've used that in the past.
Well, because it's technically not, so it's not necessarily meant to balance your pH. It can
Okay,
throw
so it's
off
a pH issue.
yeah, it
Got
can
it.
throw off the pH. You're not supposed to douche. Stop douching. Don't use a vaginal wash. If you use and this is for people that struggle with infections, but like, I don't even use soap in that area. I just splash it with water. I don't even go a swipe over it. I use an unscented soap for my whole body, so nothing even gets down there. You're not supposed to wear thongs. I can now, but I didn't for years. Tampons can really like affect it as well. You're only supposed to wear tampons on your really heavy days. So there's like all of these things that you learn and experience. And the truth is if someone is listening to this that has had chronic infections, they're probably like, heard that, yep, tried that, heard that, because it's this constant rabbit hole of like, what is going to make me feel better? And
Right. And it's really frustrating when you're doing all the things and you're not seeing any change in your symptoms.
100%. Yeah.
That's so frustrating. I mean, I've been there and I know so many other people in the IC community have been there, and you just get to a place where you're like, okay, I give up. Like, what else can I try at this point? And so it sounds like you were very lucky to, you know, have that person message you about that solution that you found with the baking soda.
Yeah. Or hydrogen peroxide.
Hydrogen peroxide.
Yeah.
Glad you corrected me.
Which if you guys want to message me about that, feel free to send me a DM. Again, this is not FDA approved. This wasn't recommended by my doctor, but I can let you know like what solution I used that really helped. And so, but yeah, I mean, I tried a lot of other things that didn't help at all that I wish I hadn't tried. Like there's this one like purplish thing that I tried that like it dyes you purple, and it was like a disaster. I was like super itchy after it. And I don't know, there's just like a bunch of different things I tried, and don't do freaking, this was the worst. I can't believe I listened to my friend. Don't do cold coconut oil balls with tea tree oil and lavender on them, because yes. So some people they'll put tea tree oil on a tampon and stick it up there, or they'll use lavender or whatever. Don't put oils in your vagina, because I'm pretty sure the tea tree oil and the boric acid suppositories like burned my vaginal wall.
Oh,
and so
boy.
like, just don't do that. So just do research on it all. And I just, you know, I think the thing is like, I want everybody who's going through this to know like you aren't alone, and join Facebook groups or on, you know, Reddit forums or whatever, that other women are going through it as well. And like, you know, it has to be a community of support for each other.
Oh yeah. They're like, sometimes I find that people with IC, just normal people, help me more than doctors have.
100%. Yeah.
Which is sad.
Yeah. It is sad, but on the other hand, in compassion and understanding for the medical field, is they are taught this one way. It's not integrative health, it's OBGYN health, it's family medicine health, and this is what they're taught to do. They're not going into specifics on, you know, studies of women who experience this chronically. That's just not what they do. And that's where, unfortunately, you have to seek outside help.
That's a really great point. And I can relate it to being a registered dietitian. We weren't taught about chronic illnesses in college. And so, you know, the dietitians who know about it probably experience it. So
yeah,
it just goes to show like, yeah, exactly what you said. They're not trained to do things multiple ways. It's very streamlined.
Yeah.
Well, we entered this conversation intending to talk about dating, yet here we are talking about bacterial vaginosis, weird little things that you learned on the internet to pick up your vagina and my bout of chlamydia. So we covered a lot.
We talked about dating for like 5 minutes. I told you my story of getting dumped
Honestly,
in
like
bed.
you and I could probably swap dating stories for a really long time. And
Probably.
it would probably be hilarious. So if you ever want to come back on the show, you are more than welcome.
I would love to. Yeah, I definitely like, I think I will shout out one more Facebook group that's really funny, but
Please.
everyone should join Are We Dating the Same Person? And they have different cities that you can join. So I'm a part of Are We Dating the Same Guy? I think it's Are We Dating the Same Guy Los Angeles? And it's they'll go on dating apps or they'll start dating someone and they'll post a picture and be like, any tea on this person, and then all these women will comment like,
Oh my gosh.
red flag, do not date that person. It is so funny. It's like the best group I've ever been a part of.
That's great. I'm sure it's funny until it happens to you and you're getting like catfished by somebody.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, yeah, dating is just a beast in its own, and it's so hard. And talk about like feeling alone and all of it. It's just like one more thing. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll save that for another time.
Yes.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on. And if people want to reach out to you with questions or whatever, listen to your podcast, where can they find you?
Yeah. So the best way to get ahead of or get in touch with me is my personal Instagram, which is @ Leanna Joan. So LeannaJoan. You can also follow our podcast, Hello and Goodbye Podcast. We're on Instagram. But right now the podcast is on a bit of a pause, and I'm kind of deciding what the future holds for us. But we have 110 episodes up that you can binge from the beginning. And if you have any specific questions about what products I use or how I help myself, feel free to slide into my DMs as well.
Amazing. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on. It has been hilarious.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Thank you so much for having me.